Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to a very special edition of the Jazz Albums Review Series, and today I am dedicating this edition to a musician who in my opinion is quite possibly the greatest sax player of all time, and I would definitely put him down in history as the greatest of all time since John Coltrane. In fact, I would probably say that this gentleman was the modern John Coltrane of our generation, and he has played with just about everybody you can imagine, from James Taylor to Paul Simon to Steely Dan, Lou Reed, Donald Fagen, Dire Straits, Joni Mitchell, Eric Clapton, Billy Joel, John Lennon, Dan Fogelberg, Frank Sinatra, Frank Zappa, Bruce Springsteen, Chaka Khan, Everything But the Girl, Patti Austin, Art Garfunkel, Carly Simon, Karen Carpenter, T-Square, and he has also played with some of the biggest names in jazz music: Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, Jan Ackerman, George Benson, Quincy Jones, Charles Mingus, Jaco Pastorius, McCoy Tyner, Pat Metheny, Klaus Ogerman, Billy Cobham, Mike Stern, Dave Holland, you name it, he's played with them all. Bob Mintzer, Gary Burton, and he has also co-led Steps Ahead and the Brecker Brothers with his brother trumpeter Randy Brecker, and the gentleman I am talking about is of course Michael Brecker, who we sadly lost 14 years ago on January 13th 2007. And Michael Brecker, as a solo artist, released 9 albums under his name as a leader, and he had such a distinct sound on the saxophone. When you heard him, you knew straight away within 5 seconds who it was, because he had such a distinct sound, and he had a solo career that lasted right up to when he passed away, 20 years, from 1987 to 2007, and I thought in dedication to his memory I would talk about all of his solo albums from start to finish, and I would choose which in my opinion is the best Michael Brecker solo album. So we're going to start talking about his first album, which was released in 1987, and that was the self-titled. Now, Michael Brecker had been an active session musician since the late 60s, but he had never released a solo album until this one, and in my opinion he kicked the door straight down and delivered, in my opinion, an absolute true classic. Every album I would say is good, but this was the one that set the tone, and he is backed by an all-star cast of musicians: Pat Metheny on guitar, Kenny Kirkland on piano and keyboards, Charlie Haden on bass, and Jack DeJohnette on drums, and tracks like Sea Glass, Syzygy, Choices, Nothing Personal, The Cost of Living, Original Rays, and a bonus track, My One and Only Love. An absolute masterpiece of an album, and 34 years later I still say this album is a true classic, and it's his best work. Doesn't get any better than the first self-titled album of Michael Brecker. Excellent. Everybody's on top form. Pat Metheny, of course, what do you expect? A true first-class act. The legendary rhythm section of Jack DeJohnette and Charlie Haden, they just absolutely blow on all cylinders. Kenny Kirkland, piano and keyboards, delivers soaring solos. What can you really say, really? And the interesting thing about this album is, apart from Kenny Kirkland, these 4 gentlemen, Michael Brecker, Pat Metheny, Charlie Haden and Jack DeJohnette, have all worked together on and off for years and years, going all the way back to Pat Metheny's 80-81 album back in 1980. So in a way this album is kind of a continuation from Pat's album, but under Michael Brecker's name, but with the addition of Kenny Kirkland. And like I said, excellent start to finish. And the album was produced by Don Grolnick, Michael Brecker's old friend from Steps Ahead. And it's very heartbreaking to learn that nearly everybody on this album, except Pat Metheny and Jack DeJohnette, are no longer with us. So this makes this album even more special. But there you have it. First album, Michael Brecker's self-titled, released in 1987, a true classic. Doesn't get any better. So we move on to the next album, Don't Try This at Home, which was released in 1988, and this pretty much continues on from the first album, and again, another strong outing from the man himself. Lots of great tracks from start to finish. It's Been Real, Chime This, Sigrabien, Suspon, Don't Try This at Home, Everything Happens When You're Gone, Talking to Myself, The Gentleman and the Heis Cane, which is a bonus track, and it's absolutely excellent. Now, everybody from the last album is present here, except Pat Metheny, so we've got Don Grolnick, Jeff Andrews, Mark O'Connor, and we have Michael Brecker's touring band, which comprised of Mike Stern, Jeff Andrews, Joey Calderazzo and Adam Nussbaum. They're present here as well. Judd Miller on synthesizer programming, Jim Beard, a who's who of jazz royalty, and we also got Herbie Hancock on a couple of tracks as well. So again, excellent album, equally as good as the first one, and a true strong outing from Brecker himself. Standout tracks, I would say, are Don't Try This at Home, Chime This, It's Been Real, and Talking to Myself. Excellent stuff. What can you really say? So we come to the third album, Now You See It, Now You Don't. I wouldn't really say this album was terrible. It's good, but compared to the first two albums, I would say it's a little bit weak, but there are still some outstanding tracks, as you'd expect from Michael Brecker himself. So we got tracks like Öyster Sketch, A Tale of Two Rhythms, Minsk, Ode to the Doodah Day, Never Alone, Peep, Dogs in the Wine Shop, Quiet City, The Meaning of the Blues. Now, again, this album was produced by Don Grolnick, and this was released on GRP in 1992, and this sounds very similar to Weather Report if this was in Wayne Shorter's direction, and it's a good album, but I wouldn't say it was terrible, but I would say it's a little bit weak compared to the first two albums. So we got musicians such as Jason Miles, Jimmy Browler, Victor Bailey, Don Alias, John Harrington, Jim Beard, Adam Nussbaum, and Don Grolnick, Don Alias, Omar Hakim, Joey Calderazzo, and we also got Milton Cardona on percussion as well. So an all-star lineup, as you'd expect from GRP. Good production as well. A good outing, but the first two albums, they're tough ones to beat, but it's still pretty good. But compared to the first two, I would say it's a little bit weak, but not terrible by any means. So as we move along, we come to 1996, which was the release of Tales from the Hudson. Absolutely love this album. This is an album I always go back to listening, and it's a great album. And I remember Pat Metheny once quoted this album as, "This is showcasing what a jazz album could sound like in the modern day," and he's absolutely right. It's absolutely a masterpiece, a true modern classic. So we've got Pat Metheny back on guitars, Jack DeJohnette's back on drums, we've got Dave Holland on bass, Joey Calderazzo on piano, and two guest appearances by McCoy Tyner on piano and Don Alias on percussion. Excellent album, tracks like Slings and Arrows, great opener, Midnight Voyage, another great track, Pat Metheny's Song for Bilboa, which we see Brecker and Metheny just absolutely decimate this piece, with Pat on guitar synth and Brecker on tenor saxophone. They just absolutely tear the crap out of this, and monster track. Bio Rivage, African Skies, which was a Brecker Brothers composition from Out of the Loop, so Brecker does his version with this band. Excellent track. Introduction to Naked Soul, which is a sax-based duo track with Michael Brecker and Dave Holland. Naked Soul, Wiley T and Cabin Fever. Excellent album, probably equally as good as the first two. Every musician on this album kicks ass. I would probably say the standout musician other than Michael Brecker himself is probably Pat Metheny. He just absolutely tears it up on guitars, and Michael Brecker and Pat Metheny always had good chemistry together. They had such a distinct sound when they hooked up. You knew straight away it was them, and the fact that Pat Metheny played on nearly Brecker's entire catalogue speaks volumes of how much Michael Brecker values and respects Pat Metheny, not just as a friend but as a fellow musician as well. So, Tales from the Hudson, excellent album, one of my favourites. Love it. So as we move along, we come to the next album, Two Blocks from the Edge, which was released in 1998. Features Michael Brecker, Joey Calderazzo, James Jennis, Jeff Tain Watts and Don Alias. Now this is more of a quartet recording and very, very good, equally as good as Tales from the Hudson. Tracks like Madame Toulouse, Two Blocks from the Edge, By George, El Nino, Cat's Cradle, The Impaler, How Long Till the Sun, Delta Sky Blues and Skylark. Excellent album. Really, really good. Equally as good as the others and love it. Probably my favourite tracks is Two Blocks from the Edge and El Nino. Love it. Really good. So, as we move along, we come to the next album, which was released in 1999, which is Time Is of the Essence. Now, my dad went to this tour, which was the only time Pat Metheny and Michael Brecker played here together in London, and this album is the only album that doesn't have a bass player, and we've got an all-star cast of musicians. Pat Metheny is back on guitar once again, Larry Golding's on organ, and three of the elite jazz drummers, Elvin Jones, Jeff Tain Watts and Bill Stewart. Great, great album. Tracks like Arc of the Pendulum, Sound Off, Half Past Late, Timeline, The Morning of This Night, Renaissance Man, Dr. Slate, As I Am, and Outrance. Excellent album. Standout tracks for me are Arc of the Pendulum, Half Past Late, Timeline, As I Am, Outrance. But again, no bad tracks in sight. Great from start to finish. Excellent album. So we move along to the next album, which was released in 2001, which is called Nearness of You, The Ballad Book. Now this album is a little bit different to previous Brecker albums. This was a collection of ballads and it's really good. It's a much more laid back album compared to the other albums, but this is still equally as good. So we have Pat Metheny once again back on guitar, Herbie Hancock and the iconic rhythm section of Charlie Haydon on bass and Jack DeJohnette on drums, and two guest appearances from vocalist James Taylor. Really good album. An album I don't really go back to much, but when I do, it always blows my mind. We've got tracks like Chan Song, Don't Let Me Be Lonely Tonight, Nescente, Midnight Mood, The Nearness of You, Incandescence, Sometimes I See, My Ship, Always, 7 Days, and I Can See Your Dreams, which is kind of like a little epilogue, and excellent album. And if you buy the Japanese edition of this, you get a bonus track called Say It Over and Over Again. So, really good album. Best tracks on the album, Chan Song, Nescente, which is Pat Metheny on guitar synth, and he just absolutely just rips it apart like he always does, and also Sometimes I See, which is a Pat Metheny group composition. So love this album, and also 7 Days is great as well. So another strong outing from Michael Brecker and an outstanding band as always. So we move along to 2003, and this is the Michael Brecker Quindicet Wide Angles. Now I was lucky to catch this tour when Michael Brecker Quindicet played here at the Barbican in 2004, and it was the only Michael Brecker concert that I went to, but boy oh boy, it was fantastic. In a way you would probably call this the Michael Brecker Big Band, because it certainly had a big band feel to it, but more of an orchestral sort of feel to it. And Gil Goldstein was present for that tour on piano and keyboards and conducting and orchestrations. So an outstanding album. Musicians features Alex Sasha Spilligin, Robin Eubanks on trombone, the brother of guitarist Kevin Eubanks, Peter Gordon, Steve Wilson, Ian Dixon, Charles Pillow, Mark Feldman, Joyce Hamann, Lois Martin, Eric Friedlander, Adam Rogers on guitar, John Patitucci on bass, Antonio Sanchez on drums, Daniel Saldanik on percussion. Outstanding band. What a all-star band. Just the fact that you got Adam Rogers, John Patitucci and Antonio Sanchez alone, I mean, that's just a monster band itself, but excellent album. Love this from start to finish. Tracks like Broadband, Cool Day in Hell, Angle of Repose, Timbuktu, Night, Jessamine, Soiler, Brexarity, Evening Faces, Modus Operandi, and Never Alone. And if you buy the Japanese edition of this album, you get a bonus track called Monk's Mood. Excellent album. I would say the best tracks for me are Broadband, Timbuktu, Celia, and Brexarity, which is like Brecker and Sanchez just really going to town, just the two of them at the beginning, which is kind of like reminiscent of the self-titled album's track Syzygy with Dijonette and Brecker. So, strong album, excellent. Really glad I got to see this live. One of the best shows I've ever been to. And we come to the final album, sadly, which was the swan song for Michael Brecker, which was Pilgrimage, which was released in 2007. And this was another first because this was all Brecker original compositions from start to finish. And even though Michael Brecker was in poor health by this point, you would never know because he played so strong, and this is some of Brecker's best playing and his best work. And once again, Pat Metheny on guitars, Herbie Hancock on piano, Brad Meldau also on piano on a few tracks, John Patitucci and Jack DeJohnette on drums, and a fitting swan song for quite possibly the greatest sax player of all time. So tracks like The Meantime, 5 Months from Midnight, Anagram, Tumbleweed, When Can I Kiss You Again, Cardinal Rule, Half Moon Lane, Loose Threads, and the title track, Pilgrimage. Top notch from start to finish. Standout tracks for me, The Meantime, Tumbleweed, When Can I Kiss You Again, and the title track, Pilgrimage, which just basically has Pat Metheny and Brecker and the entire group just really blow on all cylinders right at the end, and it's an outstanding album. And Michael Brecker would sadly pass away just after the release of this album, so if there was ever an album I would say he went out like a true boss, it's definitely this one. He really just put it all out there on the table, put it all on the line, and just delivered a true masterpiece. So, excellent stuff. So, which album would I say is the best one? It's a tough one. They're all good, but if I had to choose just one, it would have to be the first album. Love Pilgrimage, love Tales from the Hudson, love all these albums, but this is the best because it's the first one and you'll never get a chance to make another first album, and he delivered in a big way. Standout tracks for me, there isn't any. I love all of it from start to finish, but if I had to choose one, I'd probably choose Syzygy because it's just epic, especially at the beginning with Dijonette and Brecker just going to town, channeling in the spirit of John Coltrane, and Nothing Personal was good as well, but Syzygy is the best track on this album and I love it from start to finish. So 9 studio albums, and I would go with this one. It's a fantastic album. So in dedication to Michael Brecker, who we lost 14 years ago this month, all I want to say is thank you, Michael Brecker, for all of the great music you have given us on your solo albums with Steps Ahead, with Pat Metheny and the Brecker brothers and everybody else. In my opinion, you will go down as the greatest sax player of all time, and you are to me the modern John Coltrane of our time, and there will never be another one like you. You are the man, and thank you so much for everything, and may you rest in peace. And if there's any favourite studio albums of yours that you liked of Michael Brecker, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time. And once again, thank you Michael Brecker, and your memory and your legacy will live on forever.